Our last speaker is Rob Corry for the afternoon. So God bless you.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to go? All right. Let me, thanks for the opportunity to share with you again. This is going to be part 2 of a talk entitled The Double Witness of Belief and Faith. So when go ahead to the next one. The first talk, we kind of laid the groundwork for what I'm going to do here today, and that was kind of just laying out the principle that belief and faith are a double witness, that the belief is that invisible witness that God sees. It's belief is a gift. It's given to us, and the beliefs that are inside us are not visible in the earth. And so when they are matured by God to a point where we act in those and we walk in agreement with them, then that faith-based action is what becomes a visible witness to God in the earth, to God and the earth. And we talked a little bit at the end about how it's also a witness to ourselves as to where we're at in our spiritual growth. We looked at how just got something blocking me here, 1 second. Okay. We took a look at how the analogy of belief and faith to a seed and a plant, and that that seed has all that will produce the action built into it, but it's hidden. It's in the ground. It's not seen above the earth. And then when the right conditions and the right events happen, it matures, it grows, and the plant is demonstrative of all of those things that are underneath it, those underlying beliefs. And I tried to emphasize that the whole point that it's not just a witness to the world, but it's a witness to ourselves. And we talked about reflecting, and that it's kind of a metric, if you will, of where God has us in our faith life. And I wanted to share, I know I've shared this before, but it really hits me every time I read this. It's a greeting card that I came upon one time that just kind of demonstrates this. The title of the greeting card was "The Oak Tree, a Message of Encouragement." And it just reads, "A mighty wind blew night and day and stole the oak tree's leaves away. They snapped the boughs and pulled the bark until the oak tree was tired and stark. But still the oak tree held its ground while all the other trees fell around. The weary wind gave up and spoke, 'How can you still be standing, oak?' The oak tree said, 'I know that you can break each branch of mine in two, carry every leaf away and shake my limbs and make them sway. But I have roots stretched in the earth, growing stronger since my birth. You'll never touch them, for you see, they are the deepest part of me. Until today, I wasn't sure of just how much I could endure. But now I found that thanks to you, I'm stronger than I ever knew.'" So it was those trials that the tree was put through that brought it to the point where it realized the strength that it had underneath. So it's the trials God puts us through that really reveal to us, not to Him, but to us, where He's brought us in our faith life. So, go ahead to the next chart. In this talk, we're going to take a look at the principles of life's trials moving us from faith to faith, and looking at a couple of case studies. We'll look at one from the Old Testament in the beautiful life of Abraham, as far as being a vision of this unfolding from faith to faith and this growth. The second one we'll take a look at is a very specific example in the New Testament of the scenario where the apostles were unable to deliver the demon from the child, and the father of that child coming forth and saying, I believe, help me with my unbelief. We'll take a look at that as a case study. But first, I just want to do, and I will keep this brief because I got a lot to get through. Go ahead to the next chart. I want to go through, there were some scriptures. I talked a lot in the first talk about faith being a gift, but I really didn't go through all of the scriptures, and I'm not going to read each one of these, but just in summary, just to show you how much God speaks to in the Bible about faith and belief and repentance all being gifts. Philippians 1:29 is talking about belief being given to us. 2 Thessalonians 2:13 telling us that God chose us from the beginning for sanctification and belief of the truth. 2 Timothy 2:24 through 25 talks about how even repentance is given to us to the acknowledging of the truth. And Ephesians 2:8 talks to faith not being of ourselves, but faith being a gift from God. Go ahead to the next one, and we'll see that in 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 11, we see this is another passage that talks to the faith being a gift. But I just wanted to go through this one in particular rather than lumping it with the others. 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 11 reads, "Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are differences of administrations, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but there is the same God, which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit." So we see faith being called out in this list of gifts of the Spirit. To another, the gifts of healing, the same Spirit. So it goes on with miracles and prophecy and discerning of spirits and kinds of tongues, interpretation of tongues. All of these worketh that one and selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will. So I want to focus in on that word dividing. It's similar to what's in Romans 12:3, where it says, "For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is strong among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man that measure of faith." So we see dividing to every man as he severally will, and then in Romans, dealing to every man that measure of faith. The dealt came from the Greek 3307 merizo, which means to divide or separate into parts. So this dividing theme that's coming up here in these two witnesses is showing, God's doling this out in measure, very specific measure. And what we're going to see when we read through the verses that talk about, or the case studies of moving from faith to faith, he's dealing out what's necessary for the faith-based action that's occurring in a given moment. And we're also going to see that it's not always that you may be immensely matured and developed to walk in faith in a certain type of circumstance, and then be shown at the same time very weak in faith in another. So it's divided and it's doled out, and it's not necessarily an equal measure for all the different parts of your life as God matures us from faith to faith. Okay. So in Romans 1, 16 through 17, it says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. As it is written, the just shall live by faith." So ultimately, he's talking about moving us from faith to faith. This is the sanctification process within us. He's putting us through the refiner's fire. He burns off the dross. He reveals more of his righteousness within us at each phase of this faith-to-faith movement, which is moving us from one level of maturity to the next, until we reach the fullness of the stature of Christ, which is in Ephesians 4:11 through 13 in the bottom one. He's taking us to the perfection of the fullness of the stature of Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 10:6 tells us having the readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. This obedience being fulfilled is this cleansing, this purification, this sanctification, moving us from faith to the perfection that is the fullness of the stature of Christ. That is when we are ready to rule and reign with Christ. And that is what he's taking us through in this process. Go ahead to the next chart. So on the last two tables, verses were multiple witnesses to belief and faith being gifts. The verses in this table are really talking about the fact that these are all spiritually delivered, and that it's impossible for the flesh or the natural man to receive or even comprehend, let alone choose or develop this on its own. The heart and mind of the flesh trying to receive spiritually imparted gifts is kind of like trying to receive an encrypted signal without having the decryption key. You can try as hard as you want, but it's impossible to get the message out of the encrypted signal without the key. And that's what it's like for the mind of the flesh, the natural man, to try to discern things that are spiritually discerned. It's spirit to spirit, and the flesh cannot recognize it. All right, go ahead to the next one. So, we looked at faith as a gift given to us by the Spirit, and then we looked at the natural man being unable to earn this gift. The flesh can't discern it. So if the faith within us comes from the Spirit, then what does this verse mean when we read in Romans 10:17? So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Everything we just looked at said that faith came by the Spirit. So the answer that he gave to me when I was scratching my head a little bit on this one was in John 6:63, or maybe 53, I better verify that, 63. It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit, and they are life. So Jesus draws a connection between the spoken word that he delivered and the Spirit. The spoken word of God is an enabling spirit. We talked about this before. It's an enabling spirit that imparts belief and triggers faith-based action to us. Just as the seeds of belief are planted, if we have ears to hear, it still takes a spoken word to trigger that hearing. Ears that can hear, that aren't presented with a spoken word, will hear nothing. Go ahead to the next one. So I didn't catch what website I captured this from, but it's just funny how you see science finally catch up to God, almost. This is talking about quantum physics as it progresses. It was initially thought that the molecule was the smallest form of matter. This was soon rejected with the discovery of the atom, and that was rejected by the following discovery of the particle. So they keep discovering something smaller, and still they had, still searching, they'd been led to the realization that in order to find the true origin of matter, they must look beyond material substances. And they began to explore the field of energy. Their research into energy and search to identify the appearance of matter led to the latest revelation within the world of quantum physics, the string theory. As a result of perfect mathematical calculations that in over 40 years have not been proven wrong, physicists determined that the shape and structure of matter we perceive is actually made up of tiny vibrating filaments called strings. Vibrations caused by sound. They concluded that matter was created by sound. All they had to do was go to page 1 and read, "Let there be light." God said, "Let there be," and there was. It was right there in front of them the whole time. But again, so science has caught up to the fact that the spoken word has effect in the spiritual, and is that trigger mechanism for these actions that are taking place. So, the next chart, I'm going to go through that quickly and try to get to these case studies. This is just to reinforce that it's not just the spoken word that is an enabler, but we talked about this before, that the trials, tribulations that we go through in life, the heat that comes from the refining fire is part of what produces this spiritual growth within us. So, and Acts 14:22 just states it right out, that confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, that we must go through much tribulation to enter into the kingdom of God. All right, so with all that as the final building blocks, just want to go through this case study, 2 case studies, Old Testament and New Testament. So go ahead to the next chart. How many of you are familiar at all with the book of Jasher? Oh, wow, that's fun. Excellent. The book of Jasher is referenced twice in the Bible, once in Joshua 10:13 and the other in 2 Samuel 1:18. In both cases, it's essentially used as a citation, as written in the book of Jasher. So, as it turns out, in the book of Jasher documents the relationship between Abram and his father Terah. And I want to do a quick summary. This is there's a lot of detail, so I'm going to summarize up to the point that I want to focus on. Terah had been worshiping idols, and Abraham had destroyed his father's idols. Actually, the story is kind of interesting. If you're unfamiliar with it, according to Jasher, He came into the house where his father's idols were at, and he took off the heads of all the smaller ones, but he took the hatchet that he was using and he put it in the hands of the largest of the idols. And so when his father came in and said, "What have you done?" He said, "What have I done?" He points to the largest idol that has the evidence in its hand. And so, his father's like, "Well, even you know that couldn't have done it." And so he's just getting him to realize, if that idol couldn't do anything, why are you praying to any of these idols to begin with? And at that point, he took that hatchet and he destroyed the last of the idols. So Terah told King Nimrod about this and what Abram had done, and he had Abram put in prison. So after being told by his conjurers, this is Nimrod's conjurers, that Abram was Terah's son, who had been born under a special sign, 4 stars that had swallowed up all swallowed up by one, and that had foretold a fruitfulness and inheritance. Terah was supposed to have brought Abram to Nimrod when the conjurers had realized that he was born under that sign, and he didn't. He took a servant's child instead because he didn't want to part with his son Abram. And so the conjurers now recognize that this Abram that's in prison is the one who should have been done away with a long time ago. And so they reveal this to Nimrod. So now Nimrod has Terah come before him. And he asks Terah, he's interrogating him, and he gets to the point where he says, "Well, did somebody put you up to this? Who advised you to take the servant's child and bring a substitute?" And at this point, Terah throws his other son, Haran, under the bus, and he says, "Haran did it. He's the one who told that to me." So Nimrod says, "Well, then bring him and have him put in prison as well." So this is the backdrop leading up to what we're going to read. And the conclusion that Nimrod had come to was he wanted to throw both Abram and Haran into a furnace. So now I'm reading from Jasher chapter 12. "And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself." So you can see he had belief, but he wasn't acting in that belief. So it hadn't translated to faith yet. "And Haran said in his heart, 'Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things, which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king.'" So this is actually before Haran was brought in. "And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land and the king's servants and princes and all the women and little ones were there, standing that day over them." So it's very much like the scene that was shared yesterday when Robbie Yates had spoken and shared the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Everybody's coming. When they throw people in the furnace, everyone gathers around. "So as they bound their hands and feet with linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them into the furnace. And the Lord loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And the Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords which were bound with him were burned. And while Abram remained and walked about in the fire, and Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with the Lord. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 of the men died." So Abram had believed in the living God, and he had acted in complete agreement with those beliefs, and he walked by that faith, not knowing whether the outcome would favor him or not favor him. His situation was very parallel to that of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Did not know what would come, but they acted in agreement with their beliefs. But Haran, whose mind believed the same regarding idols and really wished that his dad wasn't doing what he was doing, and he was just back there behind the scenes going, "Go Abram," he was trying to hedge his bets. He just wanted to see if Abram goes before the king and he comes out okay, well then I'm going to follow Abram. But otherwise I'm on the king's side. He was not acting in that faith. Okay, so let's go to the next faith by faith example for Abram. And go to the next chart. So this is the scene right when Abram is now called to move out of the land of Ur of the Chaldees. Now note, when Abram, this is the whole setup before they moved to Ur of the Chaldees, what we just read. And you can see when Abram came out of the fire, that kind of had some impact on Terah, and Terah started paying some attention, thinking, okay, Abram's God may be the one true God here. So this is a reunion of sorts that was occurring when they moved into the land of Haran. Into the land of Haran. They came out of Ur, the Chaldees, and he's living with his family, and it's in that land, with this reunited, and his father's now on board with his faith, that he gets the command to get up and leave and move to Canaan land. So, I kind of threw some humor in yesterday and talked about, well, he didn't check the internet to see if the Canaan was a nice place to live, and he didn't, all these different things. Truth is, this was a really emotional situation. Everything he had fought for to get his dad on board, walking in faith with the one true living God, now he's got to walk away from that and leave them at Haran and follow the command. And this is what he was willing to do. What a picture of an overcomer. That this is being drawn through the refiner's fire such that people would be drawn to him. That's what happened when he went through the furnace, literally coming through the fire, and his father was drawn to him. And in the midst of that, he's now commanded to get up and move to a land that he knows nothing about. All right, now, contrast that. Let's go to the next chart. All of that, but in a different sector of Abram's life. He and Sarai are wavering a bit as time goes on regarding their belief in God blessing them with a child through Sarai. So we come to Genesis 16:2, and Sarai said to Abraham, "Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray then, go in unto my maid, so that it may be that I may obtain children by her." And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. Now, we were reading these by faith statements in Hebrews of the events in Abram's life, but we don't see one that says, by faith, Abram took Hagar to wife, and she brought forth Ishmael. It shows that our faith doesn't mature at the same rate and at the same time for all the different aspects in our life. Abram was given to the point where he went through the furnace in his belief of the one true God. But here's a part of his life where God has made him a promise, and he's still not quite there yet. But this experience and the consequences that came from it, and we're still living through those consequences today, had to have an effect on him, and it built him for the next phases of his life. If Abram was fully matured at this point, he likely would have said that, no, we should wait on the Lord to fulfill his promise. Or at least he would have gone off and said, let's pray for God's counsel on this idea. But this continued to be an area of challenge for Abram even after that occurrence. We read in Genesis 17, 16 through 21, when, we always think that, let me see if this is the right part here before I bring that up. Yeah, we always think about Sarah being the one who laughed when she heard that she would have a child. And there's actually a double witness to that. And Abraham at this time, was actually the first one who laughed at that. We see in Genesis 17, 16 through 21, "And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, Abraham said unto God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call him Isaac." So, everything he's been through, and then the experience of, there were some negative things, some impactful things that happened after Hagar had conceived and bore the child, the relationship between Hagar and Sarai, and the casting out of the child. And there were some rough things that really impacted him, and yet he's still here. He's questioning, is God really going to deliver? And he's actually advocating that God would, the whole thing here with Abraham said, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee." He's still advocating for Ishmael to be that son, because it's tangible. It's still right there. His belief hadn't been fully matured yet. All right. So, last section then, but this one we'll go back to Jasher. Go ahead to the next chart. Oh, yeah, that one there. Thanks. So, let's see. So this is the passage where Abram, let me pull this up here for a second. All right. So when we read the by faith on Abraham and the trial with Isaac, we read in Hebrews 11, starting with verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. So take a look at that last verse there, accounting that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence he received him in a figure. So the faith that he had, or the belief that he had as he went forward in faith now, to sacrifice Isaac, the belief that he had was that God was actually going to be able to raise Isaac from the dead. He wasn't afraid to follow through with the whole thing because he believed God would be able to raise him from the dead. And he uses that last sentence there, from whence he also received him in a figure. And that shows you that the experience he had in going all the way up to age 100 before Sarah conceived built the faith in him that God could bring life from that which was figuratively dead. He didn't think that her womb had the life to bring forth life. He didn't think that he had the ability to bring forth life. So he saw that God was able to deliver in the deadness that they were, bring forth Isaac to life. He therefore had a belief that if he sacrificed Isaac, God could bring that life back from something that was dead. He'd already seen it. So that whole experience that he had in wavering in his belief was building his faith to the measure of faith that he had when he was commanded to sacrifice Isaac. Now, now I want to pick up, because there's just so much, the example of this account in Jasher is incredible. So I'm picking up in Jasher, and I believe this is chapter 23 in Jasher. And at that time the word of the Lord came to Abraham. And he said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. And he said to him, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there a burnt offering upon the mountains which shall be shown for thee. For there wilt see a cloud and the glory of God. And Abraham went with Isaac his son to bring him up as an offering before the Lord, as he had commanded him. And whilst Abraham was proceeding with his son Isaac along the road, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the figure of a very aged man, humble and of a contrite spirit. And he approached Abraham and said to him, Art thou silly or brutish that thou goest to do this thing this day to thine only son? For God gave thee a son in thy latter days. In thy old age wilt thou go and slaughter him this day because he committed no violence? And wilt thou cause the soul of thine only son, to perish from the earth? Dost thou not know and understand that this thing cannot be from the Lord? For the Lord cannot do unto man such evil upon the earth, to say to him, Go, slaughter thy child. So can you relate to this? If you've ever received a word from God that pushed you out of your comfort zone, and I'm not trying to equate at all the comfort zone pushes that I've experienced with the comfort zone stretch that Abraham was being given here, but as soon as we start to operate outside of our comfort zone, if a humble and contrite person comes up and says, Have you thought this through? Do you really think that's what God wants? That's where the rationalization just starts to kick in. It might have something there, and you start thinking, this is something we can all relate to. It's a very challenging point in a faith-based action, that first legitimate question that's presented to you by somebody. It's the valley between belief and faith-based action, and the bridge that makes this one that makes one complete road across that valley is trusting in His will and in His plan. And as you come to the bridge over that valley, there's you come to a lot of bridges, you see a sign or something like that. It says last exit before toll. Well, there's a sign there that says last exit to trust in your own instincts. Instead of the little sign that goes, you get off an exit and you see the little signs that say lodging this way and meals that way. Well, if you get off at the trust in your own instincts exit, you see this way to compromise, this way to rationalization. How do I know this? Been there, done that, took the exit. So God is teaching us lessons in each of these things. And Abraham has learned that lesson, and he's able to withstand it, as we see in continuing on in chapter 23. And Abraham heard this and knew that it was the word of Satan, who endeavored to draw him aside away from the Lord. But Abraham would not hearken to the voice of Satan, and Abraham rebuked him so that he went away. And Satan returned and came to Isaac, and he appeared unto Isaac in the figure of a young man, comely and well-favored. And he approached Isaac and said to him, Dost thou know and understand that thy old silly father bringing thee to slaughter this day for naught? Now therefore, my son, do not listen nor attend to him, for he is a silly old man, and let not thy precious soul and beautiful figure be lost from the earth. And Isaac heard this, and he said unto Abraham, Hast thou heard, my father, what this man has spoken, even thus as he has spoken? So Satan failed to move the old man, and so now he moves to the young man. And I mean, another thing I can completely relate to is, experience I'll share with you. We had to put down we had a wonderful dog, a Rottweiler, that we had to put down that had cancer. And my oldest son was probably, I don't know, maybe 8 years old at the time, I forget. But he went with me, and he waited in the waiting room, and I went in with the doctor, and I stayed with him as he administered it and helped him lift this 120-pound dog off the table afterwards. And I was all good with everything that was happening until I walked out to the lobby and saw my son crying. And if you want to get to the heart of a man, get to his son and have his son come to him in an emotional state. So I can only imagine what the weight of the emotion that Abraham was carrying. And his son comes forward and says, "Have you thought about what this guy said? Do we really want to go through this?" And I don't know if he had a tear in his eye or what, but I just can't imagine again that it would be so easy in the natural mind to start to rationalize at that point again. But Abraham said unto his son Isaac, "Take heed of him, and do not listen to his words, nor attend to him, for he is Satan, endeavoring to draw us aside this day from the commands of God." And Abraham still rebuked Satan, and Satan went from them. And seeing he could not prevail over them, he hid himself from them, and he went and he passed before them in the road, and he transformed himself into a large brook of water in the road. And Abraham and Isaac and his 2 young men reached that place, and they saw the brook of large and powerful and mighty waters. And they entered the brook and passed through it, and the waters at first reached their legs, and they went deeper into the brook, and the waters reached up to their necks. And they were all terrified on account of the water. Whilst they were going over the brook, Abraham recognized that place, and he knew there was no water there before. And Abraham said to his son Isaac, "I know this place, in which there is no brook nor water. Now therefore it is Satan who does all of this to us, to draw us aside this day from the commands of God." And Abraham rebuked him and said unto him, "The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, be gone from us, for we go by the commands of God." And Satan was terrified at the voice of Abraham, and he went away from them. And the place again became dry as it was at the first. And Abraham went with Isaac toward the place that God had told him. Now how often, and I know I've done this, how often do we kind of measure the ease with which something happens as some sort of a metric of discernment for whether it's God's will for us or not? I've often heard it, and I know I've said it. We try to do something, we'll say, God keeps putting roadblocks up in front of me. Is it God that's putting roadblocks up in front of us all the time? On the flip side of this, how often do we assume that simply because everything's falling into place, that this is divinely ordained? I know very often that's my gauge on things. This had to be from God. Look how simple everything's fallen into place. And I'm not saying that that's not the case. Very often that is exactly what's going on. But we should sincerely pray for discernment when things are going very easy, or when things are going very hard, or even when things are going kind of partly easy. Discernment, discernment, discernment. It is a challenge for us to see. We have to really search and see what is God commanding us, and understanding and discerning what God's commanding us, and walking in that faith, trusting that it's not going to happen if that's what he's commanding us, the things that are blocking me, until I understand I'm being commanded differently, I can't interpret that that's God saying, oh, no. So it's really hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I struggle with this. I've had things in my life, had impactful things in my life where I still scratch my head and wonder, did I follow Satan's influence? Or did I recognize God finally giving me an alternative? So it's a real challenge, but we can see that Abraham, through his faith-to-faith progression, was brought to a point, and the spiritual discernment that he was blessed with allowed him to see that. So continuing on, and on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place at the distance which God had told him of. And the pillar of fire appeared to him. It reached from earth to heaven, and a cloud of glory upon the mountain. And just like Ron talked to this morning, the glory of God was seen in the cloud. I mentioned to him afterwards, I work in defense contracts and intel contracts, and every contract we're working on is about migrating the mission to the cloud. So, as Ron always says, the technology of the day is prophesying of what's going on. And so with the glory being in the cloud, this is all prophesying of that. I was thinking of that when I read this morning. So Abraham said to Isaac, my son, dost thou see in that mountain, which we perceive it at a distance, that which I see upon it? So he's asking Isaac, do you see the glory of God up on that mountain? And Isaac answered his father and said, I see, lo, a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of the Lord is seen upon the cloud. And Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Lord for the burnt offering. Because he was able to see it, and remember, we talked about Passover being about justification, being an invisible witness. We talked about Pentecost being a hearing witness of sanctification. And we talked about Tabernacles being the glorification and a visible seeing witness. So we can see this is a picture of a Tabernacles walk that Abraham and Isaac were walking in. So Abraham took wood for a burnt offering and placed it upon his son Isaac. And he took the fire and the knife, and they both went to that place. And when they were going along, Isaac said to his father, behold, I see here the fire and wood, and there is no lamb to be burnt offering for the Lord. And Abraham answered his son, saying, the Lord has made choice of thee, my son, to be a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb. And Isaac said unto his father, I will do all that the Lord spoke to thee with joy and cheerfulness of heart. And Abraham again said to Isaac his son, is there in thy heart any thought or counsel concerning this, which is not proper? Tell me, my son, I pray thee. O my son, conceal it not from me. And Isaac answered his father Abraham, and he said unto him, O father, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is nothing in my heart to cause me to deviate either to the right or to the left from the word that he has given to thee. Neither limb or muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there anything in my heart or any thought of evil counsel concerning this. But I am joyful and cheerful in my heart in this matter, and I say, blessed is the Lord who this day has chosen me to be a burnt offering for him. And Abraham greatly rejoiced at the words of Isaac as they went on and came together to that place that the Lord had spoken of. Nothing really needs to be said relative to that section. The level of trust in the perfect will of God is simply evident in their words. And Abraham approached to build the altar in that place, and Abraham was weeping. And Isaac took stones and mortar until they had finished building the altar. And Abraham took the wood and placed it in order upon the altar that he had built. And he took his son, bound him in order to put him upon the wood, upon the altar to slay him for the burnt offering before the Lord. And this next verse always gets me. This next verse, you can see the level of faith by which Isaac was acting and his recognition of the point of no return that they had kind of reached at this point. And you can see the recognition that he knew his flesh might react to this differently than his spirit wanted to react. And so he says to his father in verse 61, and Isaac said to his father, bind me securely, and then place me upon the altar, lest I should turn and move and break loose from the force of the knife upon my flesh, and therefore profane the burnt offering. And Abraham did so. It's incredible. So I'm going to skip down a bit to focus on, let me just skip down. And the hearts of Abraham and Isaac rejoiced at this thing, which the Lord had commanded them, and the eye wept bitterly whilst the heart rejoiced. And Abraham bound his son and placed it upon the altar of the wood, and Isaac stretched forth his neck upon the altar before his father. And Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay his son as a burnt offering before the Lord. So, in the interest of time, we've kind of reached the apex of the event here. And in the story, the account describes that the angels of mercy came pleading to the Lord that he might have mercy on Abraham and provide a substitute offering as a ransom or a redemptive offering. And the Lord calls to Abraham from heaven, telling him not to lay a hand upon Isaac, and for he now knows that Abraham was willing to follow through with his obedience to his command. And then Abraham lifts up his eyes and he sees the ram caught in the thicket, and he frees Isaac to get the ram and prepares it as a substitute. So when I first read that, I kind of scratching my head a little bit. Boy, it really seems like they got to the point of no return, and if it wasn't for the angels of mercy coming in and pleading the case, this might have followed through. And you know what? Maybe it would have been as Abraham originally believed. But as I continued to read on, later in the passage, read about how the Lord had prepared that particular ram from the foundation of the world to be the substitute offering in this scenario. The Lord had brought Abraham and Isaac to a level of faith whereby they had been prepared to follow through with this command, but the Lord knew that that would be the level of faith they would have at that point, and he planned for them to be at that level of faith by planning ahead of time to have this substitute prepared from the foundation of the world. He had prepared a substitute offering, and he spoke those words. He said, "Now I know." But in fact, if he had prepared the ram as a substitute from the foundation, he had to have known before. And I started thinking further, God is he's timeless. He's outside of time. So the whole notion of, oh, now I know, as if there's something that's been revealed to him that he's just discovered. I really believe that he said these words from that perspective for Abraham's benefit. By the interaction they had with Abraham, it would have great impact for him to hear those words. Now, I know that, the example I'm going to give, again, this is one of the most intense accounts of anything I've ever read. So when I talk about this parallel, I know, but if you, as a father, playing with my children in the yard, whether you're in the driveway playing hockey or soccer in the backyard or something, how often does a father allow their son to score on them and then say, "Oh, wow, that was great, you scored," as if I didn't know he was going to score, and I didn't, and you don't, let that score, and you have to act it out. You can't, you have to fake it. But when you say it, you don't say, "Wow, I let you score." No, you're building up and encouraging them and building that confidence in them by having them have that experience. And so I have to believe that Father said, "Now I know that you would have done that he said that to Abraham to be that final cementing of the faith that was matured in that whole experience." And also think about the impact that this had on Isaac, who seemed to waver a bit when Satan had appeared as the young man and presented himself. This was a quantum leap of faith for Isaac to have gone through that whole experience with his father and to see what the Lord had done and prepared for them. So, by faith, that was given to them by Father's plan. They acted, and in the end, it was a visible witness to both Abraham and Isaac, and it revealed the level of faith that was within them. All right, so let's go ahead and move to the next one. I think this is our New Testament example. So the backdrop prior to this event, this is the scene when the event where the apostles were unable to deliver the demon from the boy who was suffering. Just prior to this event, Jesus had taken Peter and John to the high mount and was transfigured before them. And as they were returning and discussing amongst the three of them why it was that the scribes said that Elias must come first, then they came to the rest of the disciples who were amongst the scribes and a great multitude who were questioning them. So this is the whole scene when Jesus comes upon them. So this is. So we read, "And one of the multitude answered and said, 'Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit, and whosoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth, and gnasheth his teeth, and pineth away. And I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. And Jesus' immediate response was, O faithless generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I suffer you? So immediately Jesus draws their attention to this being a faith issue. And Jesus asked them, how long will I be with you? How long will I tarry with you? Well, these are rhetorical questions. I mean, he clearly knows the plan. And so he's just saying these words again to set a context for them, to make this event impactful for them. Then he asks the father of the child, how long ago since this came upon him? Again, I mean, this is not an ER triage where Jesus has a little sheet of paper and he's saying, okay, when was the last time the doctors, they have all the shot? He's saying these things to bring context and to create a situation. And he's able to tell if he was able to tell the woman at the well everything about her life, I'm sure he knew how often this came upon this poor child. So the man responds to Jesus and he says, of a child, and oft times it hath cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. So you can see there's a little bit of doubt here. He didn't come to him the way the woman came to him to touch the hem, who knew if I just touch his garment, I'm going to be healed. He's saying, if you can't do anything here, at least have compassion on us. Can you help us? He's kind of coming with a wavering approach to begin with. And perhaps his belief was stronger before the experience with the apostles. I mean, maybe the apostles' inability to do something created a little bit of wavering in his beliefs. But Jesus shines a little bit more light on this issue of belief in the next part, where he says, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. And the man responds emphatically with tears in his eyes, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. So this is where the man finally lays it out there. He's just kind of throwing everything on the table, and he confesses, I believe, help me with my unbelief. So he recognizes within himself that his beliefs are not completely stable here. He's not walking in faith. Jesus responds to that declaration and confession. And notice how the passage points out the timing. When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto them, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter him no more. So as Jesus is healing the man's son out of love and mercy and compassion, he's also kind of orchestrating the event so that the crowds would see what was going on and hear this message of faith, or this situation of belief and faith. He may be even doing it more so for his disciples who were unable to because of unbelief. And it's afterwards that the disciples had come to him and asked why they were unsuccessful. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, Why could we not cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you. Howbeit, this kind goeth out by prayer and fasting. So the part about prayer and fasting kind of jumped out at me, and I was thinking about that for a while. And I was thinking about it really in light of earlier when Jesus and the disciples had been met by John's disciples. John's disciples questioned, this is in Matthew chapter 9. John's disciples were questioning, why is it that your disciples don't fast? They'd came to him and said, Why do we and the Pharisees fast oft, but thy disciples fast not? And Jesus said unto them, Can the children of the bride chamber mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and they shall fast. So in a way, I felt like this was a little bit of a setup. Jesus saying they can't fast. The bridegroom is still with them. Their time to fast will be later. But yet he's saying this one comes out by prayer and fasting, you faithless generation. So what it really kind of emphasized to me is this notion of from faith to faith, the dealing out of faith on a time-based sequence to take people from level of faith to the level of faith. It wasn't time for the apostles to walk in the level of faith that they needed for this particular act, and so that would come at a future time. That passage finishes up with this in verse 16. Wait a second, let me just back up. Yeah, so in verse 16 it says, "No man putteth a piece of new cloth into an old garment, for that which is put in to fill it up taketh from the garment, and the rent is made worse. Neither do men put new wine into old bottles, else the old bottles break, and the wine runneth out, and the bottles perish. But they put new wine into new bottles, and both are preserved." Now, those of you who know me know that I do make homemade wine, and I have had the experience of new wine in a bottle exploding all over the floor, so I can relate to this. But what Jesus is really talking about here is the mindset of belief and faith-based action that is required for the situation that they were dealing with is really that the new man will be able to handle. The old man, if you try to take this in from the natural, it can't expand that way. Yeah, it's going to take a new man mindset in order to take this new belief in faith-based action. The old cannot handle it. All right, go to the next chart and we'll wrap this up, I think. Yes. So he says to them, that this one shall come out by prayer and comes out by prayer and fasting. And again, it hit me. Is that really what was the message there? And I started thinking about it and praying on it. And I was praying about this event, and so the whole notion of kind of came together when God put the verse from Isaiah 58 into my head. This is Isaiah 58, 2 through 12. "Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways. As a nation that did righteousness and forsook not the ordinance of their God. They ask of me the ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching to God. Wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure, and exact all your labors. Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the wickedness of the fist. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is this such a fast as I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast, and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring poor that are cast out into thy house, when thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh?" So God, through Isaiah, shares the fast that he's chosen for us. Not that there's anything wrong with a physical fast, but the fast that God's chosen for us is to loose the bands of wickedness, the cleansing of the house, to undo the heavy burdens, the heavy burden that James has been describing to us, that the mystery Babylon has put upon us, to undo those heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free. Feeding the hungry, the poor, bringing them into your house. This is the fast that God chooses. So I'm going to read to you from this section off of a website. This is an article by a Ralph, I'll probably butcher the pronunciation of the name, Cinque is the name, Ralph Sink, or I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but it's on the benefits of fasting. And I want this is going to read from a physical, natural perspective, but I want you to think on the level of that fast that we were just talking about. The first question you might ask, why should I fast? A thorough answer to that question could comprise an entire book. Think about what happens when you go to sleep at night. Your body immediately goes about the tasks of repair and recovery as much as possible from the wear and tear of the day's activities. A renovation takes place in your brain and throughout your entire body that enables you to arise refreshed and raring to go the next morning. The restorative power of a night's sleep involves many factors, and the process is not completely understood. But one factor that definitely helps facilitate rejuvenation is your nightly fast. While you are sleeping, you are not eating. You are not adding to your body's digestive work. The period of digestive rest allows your body to devote more of its energy to the nightly restoration. Your sleep leaves if you eat A heavy meal late at night, it interferes with the quality of your sleep and it leaves you feeling groggy the next day. Heavy eating late at night is much like heavy drinking late at night. It leaves you with a hangover. Abstinence from food at night facilitates the process of biological renewal. So he goes on to keep talking about the benefits of this. During fasting, your senses become more acute, including taste, smell, and hearing. Even sight has been known to improve during a fast, so hearing and sight are improved. Balance and stability. Most people are familiar with the term homeostasis, which refers to the body's balancing and centering and stabilizing mechanisms. I actually wasn't familiar with that. Those are his words. Homeostatic mechanisms are what enable your body to adjust to the relentless changes in your external and internal environments. It is easier for your body to maintain homeostasis when you are resting and fasting than when you are eating and engaging in activity. The conservation of energy during such a profound period of rest creates a favorable condition for the biological processes of healing. So hearing, seeing, and a rest work are seen in this. Your next question might be, will I be hungry at the time when I'm fasting? The surprising fact is that after a few days of fasting, most people experience little or no desire for food. The desire to eat is dictated by a combination of psychological and physiological factors. It is thought that hunger is triggered by the activity of certain brain cells within the appetite center of the hypothalamus, which respond to blood glucose levels. During fasting, the body begins to burn fat as a fuel, and the appetite center becomes temporarily desensitized to glucose levels. This makes it possible to fast without a gnawing hunger. So, symptoms may arise during fasting, such as headaches. It goes on to list other physical symptoms. Dr. Shelton uses the term orthopedic, which means right suffering. So we talked earlier about how faith will be developed by belief is given to us, but also suffering is given to us. And here he's talking about right suffering, describing the events of headaches and nausea and skin eruptions and things, that these are cleansing the body of physical toxins. It's right suffering that produces that purification. So now, think about everything I just read, but now turn it into a perspective from the fast of Isaiah 58 instead of a physical fast. And think about the proverb that says, Proverbs 19:27, "Cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causeth to err from the words of knowledge." So there is instruction that's out here in the world that can lead us astray from the words of knowledge. Think about Philippians 4:8. "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are honest, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there's any virtue and if anything be of praise, think on these things." Both of these passages are telling us to focus our minds on those things which are pure and avoid focusing those things that lead us astray. That's a mind fast. The fast that God spells out for us in Isaiah 58 is one of walking in His faith, one of service, one of Christian liberty, freeing the burdens. When we put our mind into those activities, our mind is not going to be on the things that lead us astray from the knowledge of truth. Our mind is not going to be on the things of the world, things of the natural. So Isaiah 58, that fast, is a mind cleanse. Just as a physical fast is a cleansing of our body. As we feed the hungry, bring the poor into our houses, clothe the naked, we are fasting from feeding ourselves and serving ourselves. We're fasting from making our houses nicer for ourselves. We're fasting from buying better clothes for ourselves when we're doing all these things outside. There will be hunger pangs, there will be headaches, there will be the discomforts of a physical fast, but in our minds rather than our bodies. Just as the physical fast will cleanse the body of toxins and bring balance to our system, the mind fast of Isaiah 58 will cleanse our hearts and minds and bring balance. A singularly minded rather than double-minded approach. This is the power and the prayer and the fasting that God chooses as He reveals His righteousness through His saints as we read the rest of this passage. This is in Isaiah 58, "Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go forth before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and He shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, the speaking of vanity, This is that mind fast. If thou draw out thy soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shalt thy light arise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. And the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bones. And thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places, and thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations. Amen.